So I'm Julie Grabby, and this morning we wanted to record Judge Braun's speech about jury duty. And I really love this speech. It's one of my favorites. When we go to jury trial, I get to hear this. So I wanted to share it and make it available for the public to hear, because I think that the public forgets about the importance of jury trial. You know, as a lawyer, a lot of times when someone I know gets a jury summons, they call me and they say, hey, how do I get out of this? And really, jury duty is so important to our legal system. And I think Judge Braun does such a great job explaining that and explaining where it comes from and why it's important for us to serve on jury duty. And so I wanted to share that with you. I love the speech, and I hope you enjoy it too.
Dulles County District Court is now in session. Honorable Glenn R. Braun presiding.
Good morning. You can be seated. To all of our prospective jurors, welcome. On behalf of the staff and clerks of the Ellis County District Court, we very much appreciate you being here this morning. Look, we all understand jury service is a tremendous inconvenience. You have to readjust your lives, you've got work, school's getting ready to start, and we all understand that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about jury service and its importance to our nation. What brought you here today? You're all sitting there saying, well, Judge, you sent us this order. It said we have to be here. It's called a summons. And you're correct. That's how we get you to come to the building. But what really brought you here today is the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the state of Kansas, and the laws of the state of Kansas. Anybody notice that we're in an election year? Right? All right. Well, it seems like we're in an election year every year. But we really are now. I mean, in Iowa, all the presidential contenders were there, and you will hear a lot of them talk about the Constitution. The more they talk about it, you may, if you go read it, realize that they probably haven't read the Constitution. But I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Constitution as it relates to jury service. The Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution. Remember the 10 Amendments? We're all pretty familiar with number 1, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, right? We're all pretty familiar with the Second Amendment. In fact, during presidential campaigns, you would think there's only one amendment. And of course, that's the right to a militia and the right to bear arms. And in the rest of them, we kind of forget about. And we may remember them a little bit from civics class, but the one that brought you here today is the Sixth Amendment. And I want to read it to you. It reads, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein he resides. And then there's more to it after that. And that amendment applies to the states. In Kansas, we have a Bill of Rights, just like the federal government does. And one of those Bill of Rights in the state of Kansas says, the trial by jury shall be inviolate, which means can never be taken away. It is precious and must be preserved. And we also have a state law, KSA 43-155, and it states as follows. The public policy of this state is declared to be that jury service is the solemn obligation of all qualified citizens, and that excuses from the discharge of this responsibility should be granted by the judges of this courts of this state only for reasons of compelling personal hardship or because requiring service would be contrary to the public welfare, health, or safety. That all litigants entitled to a trial by jury shall have the right to jury selected at random from a fair cross-section of the community in the district where the court convenes, and that all citizens shall have the opportunity to be considered for service on juries in the District Court of Kansas. Everybody thinks we ought to obey the laws, right? Okay. And this morning, most of you probably drove here, and you enjoyed the benefit of laws. Because if we all just had our choice to just drive any way we wanted, and we didn't obey stop signs and yield signs, particularly in those nice roundabouts we have now, none of you would have made it here today because you'd all be in wrecks, right? That's just one example of laws. Well, this is a law that likewise has to be followed. But where did all this stuff about jury service come from? Okay? Did somebody just pull it out of the air? No. It goes all the way back to the Declaration of Independence. On July 4th, we celebrate a very important event, and that's the publication of the Declaration of Independence. Most of us kind of remember some of the language from that remarkable document. And I want to read a little bit to you just as a reminder. It starts out, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another. What that means is dissolve the bonds between the colonies and King George and England. And then later, in the next paragraph, it says this, and this is the one everybody remembers. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Sound familiar? But what we forget about, and I would encourage you all to go if you get a chance and read the Declaration of Independence, is after that beautiful language was written by Thomas Jefferson, the members of that body then outlined in great detail their complaints against King George. Taxation without representation, and a variety of others. And guess what? Right there, in the Declaration of Independence, one of the complaints was, quote, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury. The very document that commenced the founding of this country talks about the importance of jury service. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what brought you here today. Now, you've heard my words, but I think it's important to hear from some really significant individuals about what they believed about jury service. Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to Thomas Paine, said this. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the third president of the United States, said this: I consider the trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man by which a government can be held to the principles of its Constitution. John Adams, the second president of the United States, and also one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, said this: representative government and trial by jury are the heart and lungs of liberty. And no less an authority than Groucho Marx had this to say: I was married by a judge. I should have asked for a jury. How many of you love the United States of America? Raise your hand. How many of you like lawyers? Raise your hand. Oh, there's a couple. There's always a few. Out of the 70 we may have had, the records should reflect there were 3 or 4. That's not a surprise. But the reason I bring it up is there's an important thing to remember. There were 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. 56 men convened in Philadelphia, and they signed that document. And they signed their own death warrant. Because if that revolution had been unsuccessful, King George would have executed every one of them for treason. Of the 56 signers of that Declaration of Independence, 24 of them were lawyers. Lawyers drafted the Declaration of Independence, and lawyers drafted the Constitution that your liberties that you enjoy are protected by. So, I know lawyers are hard to like, but if you like your liberties, and if you like the country, you kind of owe them a debt of gratitude. So, give them a kind word or thought once in a while. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a brief civics lesson about the importance of jury service. You know, when I was a lawyer, and I practiced law for 31 years before I went on the bench, I'd get a lot of phone calls in the evening. And I would know then that jury summonses went out, or jury notices, and clients and friends would call and say, hey, I got this jury summons. How do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? And I would say, don't. Okay? Number one, it's your solemn obligation by law. You heard me read that. It is important as a citizen, just as important as it is to vote and to obey those traffic laws and everything else, to serve on a jury. And I said, and your service is important to both the state and the defendant to preserve that Sixth Amendment right that I read to you earlier. So as we go through this process this morning, please keep that in mind. If you had any inclination about, or if you called a lawyer and they wrongfully told you how you could supposedly get out of this, refrain from doing that. We need you. The state and the defendant could not receive a fair trial without your participation, and I know that you'll all honor your responsibility as citizens this morning.